It started with a smell. Not smoke, not fire. Something oily, chemical. The kind of scent that sticks to your skin and tells you one thing: someone wanted you gone. That morning was calm. Sun over the lake, hens clucking, my old dog Scout running ahead. Then he froze, growled. I followed his stare and saw smoke curling from my field. By the time I reached it, everything was gone. My crops, the soil, the irrigation lines, black ash. The smell of fuel everywhere. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't an accident. It was a message, and I already knew who sent it. Karen Whitfield, the HOA president with a clipboard and a god complex. She wanted me out. But she didn't know. The water under her perfect lawns, her ponds, her sprinklers, it all ran through my dam, and when the time came, I'd remind her who really owned it. But let me start at the beginning. Before we dive in, let me know where you're listening from today. The morning started like every other, quiet, golden, and steady. The kind of morning that makes you forget the world has sharp edges. Sunlight poured across the fields, catching on the dew-soaked leaves. The smell of damp earth, coffee on the porch, and Scout's tail thumping against the wooden step. It was all routine, all comfort. Scout, my old lab, was the sort of dog who never barked without reason. Usually he'd chase rabbits or birds just for sport, but that morning he froze halfway down the path. His tail stiffened, ears pricked, and a low growl rolled out from deep in his chest. At first, I thought he'd spotted a fox near the coop again. But then I smelled it, not smoke, not fire, something heavier, oily, artificial. It clung to the air, stinging the back of my throat like diesel and melted plastic. I put my coffee down and started toward the field, my boots crunching through dry grass. Then I saw it. The south cornfield, or what was left of it, looked like the aftermath of a storm. Black streaks through the rows, ash lifting in the wind like ghostly dust. The stalks were gone, melted down to dark stubs, and right in the middle of it all, the irrigation line had been torn open, cut, not burned. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't some freak electrical short. This was deliberate. Scout paced beside me, whining. He kept sniffing the soil, his fur standing on end. I knelt down and ran my fingers across the dirt, slick. My fingertips came up black and shiny. Fuel. I didn't need a lab to tell me that someone had poured accelerant across my field. The burn pattern was too clean, too even. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, and they wanted it to look like an accident. I stood there for a while, long enough for the wind to sting my eyes and for the silence to settle. That silence was the worst part. No birds. No insects. Just the sound of the lake lapping softly behind me, calm, indifferent, as if nature itself refused to take sides. I should have felt angry, but what I felt was colder than that. A kind of sinking clarity. Because this wasn't random. 2 weeks ago, Karen Whitfield, the HOA president, had stood right on that same patch of dirt, her perfect white sneakers dusted with my soil, telling me my cornfield didn't fit the neighborhood aesthetic. She'd smiled when she said it too. That fake smile, the kind that hides a threat behind politeness. That day, I told her this land had been in my family long before her subdivision existed. She told me rules were rules, and now, my field was gone. Scout barked suddenly, dragging me out of the thought. He'd found something, near the irrigation line. A small, half-melted plastic canister wedged in the mud. I picked it up with a stick. The label was scorched, but one line was still visible. Contractor use only. Whitfield HOA maintenance. That was all I needed to see. I didn't say anything out loud, but Scout seemed to know. He sat beside me, quiet, waiting. This wasn't an accident, I finally said, my voice low. He tilted his head, like he understood. This was war. The rest of the day moved like smoke, slow, heavy, clinging to everything. I called the fire department, but they only sent a report form and a bored-sounding deputy who said, "We'll file it under accidental ignition unless we find evidence otherwise." Evidence otherwise, I almost laughed. I had plenty of that. Still, I didn't tell them everything, not yet. I wanted to know just how deep this went. That night, I sat on the porch again, watching the blackened field fade into the dark. The stars reflected off the lake like shards of glass. Scout lay at my feet, and the smell of fuel still hung faintly in the air. I thought about my grandfather, the man who built this farm from nothing. He used to say, "Land remembers how you treat it. Sooner or later it gives back what you put in." I'd always thought he meant crops and hard work, but that night I realized he might have meant something else. Retribution. Because land doesn't just belong to people, it knows them. It carries their stories, their names, their debts, and mine was about to collect. I pulled out the old metal box from under the porch bench, the one that held our family's deeds and water rights. Papers yellowed with time, sealed signatures, the proof of everything Karen had conveniently chosen to ignore. As I thumbed through the pages, one caught my eye, an old water rights deed from 1973 marked in my grandfather's name. It showed the dam, the tributary routes, and most importantly, the irrigation control gates that fed directly into the HOA's manicured lawns and ornamental ponds. Their sprinklers ran because of my dam. Their lawns stayed green because of my grandfather's system, and Karen Whitfield? She'd just set fire to the man who literally owned the water under her feet. I folded the deed carefully and set it on the table beside me. Scout looked up when I said, "Guess they forgot who they were dealing with." He wagged his tail once, slow and deliberate. The fire had taken my field, but it had also cleared something else. My hesitation. Tomorrow I'd drive to town, meet Jody from the county office, pull public access records, and once I had everything lined up, I'd make sure the HOA understood what real control looked like, because if Karen thought she could burn me out, she was about to find out what happens when the man who owns the water stops sharing it.